In 1999, the film Life premiered, creating a unique phenomenon in the hearts of audiences. With a story about two strangers wrongly convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment in Mississippi, the work was not merely a commercial success. Thanks to the star power of its leads, it became an unforgettable memory for a generation. It was a film that balanced raucous laughter with the harsh realities of time, injustice, and the enduring power of friendship. The chemistry between the characters wove a tapestry of brotherhood that transcended the prison bars. But behind those classic characters, behind the laughter and the graying hair of the makeup, were actors with their own very distinct fates. 25 years have passed, and time has carved different marks upon their real lives. Some continued to shine brilliantly, conquering new heights of fame. Others chose a quieter path, seeking peace away from the spotlight. And tragically, some had to stop their journey in sorrow and silence. Today, let us look back at the tumultuous paths of the cast that created the soul of Life. Eddie Murphy as Rayford Gibson. In Life, the character Rayford Gibson is the catalyst for the entire story, a fast-talking, cunning hustler whose schemes land both him and his companion in a world of trouble. With his sharp wit, scheming eyes, and a carefree attitude that masked a survivor's instinct, Rayford left an indelible impression. As a man who refused to let his spirit be broken by incarceration, Eddie Murphy's performance at the age of 38 was a masterclass in balancing his signature comedic energy with a newfound dramatic depth, portraying a man aging from his 20s to his 90s with remarkable authenticity. Utilizing our background knowledge, we see that Eddie Murphy's real life was entering a phase as complex and dramatic as any movie script he was. Already a global icon, the king of comedy. But the turn of the millennium brought a storm. While Rayford Gibson was a man who could talk his way out of anything, Murphy found himself in situations where words failed him. His marriage to Nicole Mitchell, which had seemed like a picture-perfect Hollywood union, began to crumble under the weight of bitter arguments and the suffocating pressures of his immense fame. The fairy tale wedding of 1993 gave way to a reality of strife, leading to a divorce in 2006 that became one of the most expensive settlements in entertainment history. His career, too, faced a precipice. In 2002, the sci-fi comedy The Adventures of Pluto Nash was released to disastrous reviews and box office returns, a failure so significant it threatened to bankrupt his credibility as a box office draw. Forced to take on roles to maintain his lifestyle, rather than out of pure artistic passion, he navigated a minefield of criticism. Yet, like Rayford Murphy was a survivor, he reinvented himself for a new generation, with Shrek Dreamgirls, which earned him an Oscar nomination, and Norbit. However, his personal life remained turbulent. The 2007 paternity scandal, with Mel B, where DNA tests were required to prove his fatherhood, intensified the media glare, leaving him mentally exhausted and wary of the public eye. Through it all, Murphy sought to balance the chaos of his public life with a desire for a stable home. He faced the immense pressure of supporting a growing family that would eventually include 10 children. It was a juggling act of maintaining his status as a comedy legend while navigating lawsuits, public scrutiny, and the quest for personal happiness. He retreated somewhat from the limelight, choosing his projects more carefully, seeking a peace that had eluded him during the peak of his mania. The connection between the role and his life is striking. Rayford Gibson was a man whose schemes often backfired, forcing him to adapt and survive in a hostile environment. Similarly, Eddie Murphy's life was filled with missteps and controversies that could have ended a lesser star's career. Yet, like Rayford, he always found a way to keep going, using his wit and resilience to remain relevant. Today, at the age of 64, Eddie Murphy is experiencing a renaissance. He has returned to his iconic roles in Coming to America and Beverly Hills Cop Axel F., proving that his comedic genius is timeless. He has found a quieter, more private happiness, recently marrying Paige Butcher and raising their children. His journey is a testament to relentless effort and the ability to weather the storm, remaining a comedy icon who has survived the brink of bankruptcy and the chaos of love to stand tall as a legend. Martin Lawrence as Claude Banks in Life. Claude Banks is the naive dreamer, a bank teller with plans for a legitimate life that are derailed by bad luck and bad company. He serves as the emotional anchor of the film, the straight man to Rayford's antics. Martin Lawrence, at the age of 34, delivered a performance that was both hilarious and heartbreaking. He captured the essence of a man who loses everything but eventually finds a new definition of family within the prison walls. His chemistry with Murphy was electric, creating a duo for the ages. Behind the laughter, however, Martin Lawrence's real life was unraveling in a way that was far from funny. He was one of the biggest stars in the world, with the sitcom Martin and the Bad Boys franchise, but his internal world was in chaos. His first marriage to Patricia Southall, which began in 1995, with great hope, crumbled rapidly amidst accusations of volatility and emotional outbursts. The pressures of fame seemed to trigger a deep-seated instability. Even after his divorce in 1997, and a subsequent relationship with Shamika Gibbs that brought temporary peace, the old cycles of stress and erratic behavior continued to haunt him. The physical and mental toll on Lawrence was immense. He suffered from fame-induced paranoia and the stress of long shooting schedules. His health became a major concern, most notably in the infamous 1999 incident, often confused with an earlier 1996 incident where he collapsed from heat exhaustion while jogging in heavy clothing to lose weight for a role. He fell into a coma for 3 days with a body temperature of 107 degrees Fahrenheit, a near-fatal event that left him with lasting trauma. This wasn't just physical, it led to anxiety episodes and required him to be hospitalized, forcing studios to treat him with extreme caution. Despite these terrifying setbacks, Lawrence continued to work. He starred in the blockbuster Big Mama's House franchise and continued his comedy tours. But his family life remained tumultuous, culminating in another painful divorce in 2012. He was a man fighting to keep his sanity while the world demanded him to be the funniest man in the room. He had to learn to balance the adrenaline of the stage with the desperate need for calm in his private life, a struggle that often played out in the public eye. The connection between Claude Banks and Martin Lawrence is profound. Claude was a man whose life was derailed by circumstances beyond his control, forcing him to find strength he didn't know he had. Martin Lawrence, too, saw his life derailed by his own mental and physical health crises. While Claude was trapped in a physical prison, Martin often seemed trapped in the prison of celebrity and his own mind. Today, at the age of 60, Martin Lawrence continues to act, having regained international fame and affection with the massive success of Bad Boys 4, Life, and its sequels. He leads a much quieter private life now, seemingly having found the balance that eluded him for so long. His journey is a testament to resilience. A man who literally came back from the brink of death to reclaim his crown as a comedy royalty. Nedbeatty as Dexterwilkins. In Life, Ned Beatty starred as Dexter Wilkins, the stern and later cunning prison warden. On the surface, Wilkins appeared to be a somewhat reasonable authority figure compared to the brutal guards, but he ultimately exploited the prisoners for his own gain. At the age of 62, Beatty brought a gravitas to the role, portraying the banality of evil with a smile. He was the face of the system that kept Ray and Claude trapped, and his performance was a masterclass in subtle villainy. The role was in keeping with the power Beatty wielded in Hollywood for decades. He was a legendary character actor, known for Deliverance, Superman, and Network. But once the cameras stopped rolling, his private life revealed a very different kind of isolation. He was a man who loved deeply but struggled to maintain relationships amidst the chaos of his career. His first marriage to Walter Chandler endured nearly a decade of his long absences before falling apart. The pattern repeated with his second wife, Belinda Rowley, and his third, Dorothy Tinker Adams. His longest marriage ended after 19 years in a bitter dispute that exhausted him emotionally more than any role he ever played. Beatty's life was a testament to the sacrifice required by his profession. He was often called the busiest actor in Hollywood, but that busyness came at a cost. Years of grueling filming, cross-country travel, and the weight of emotionally demanding roles gradually eroded his stamina. He wasn't just a star. He was a working actor who never said no, driven by a need to provide and a love for the craft. This physical exhaustion became evident in his later years. Yet he found a late-in-life peace when he remarried in 1999 to Sandra Johnson, finding the stability he had craved after decades of personal turmoil. Even as he aged, he continued to deliver iconic performances, such as the voice of Lotso in Toy Story 3, a character that mirrored the deceptively fatherly nature of Warden Wilkins. He worked tirelessly, leaving a legacy of over 160 roles. He was a man who dedicated his entire existence to the screen, often at the expense of his own rest. The connection between the role and his life is ironic. Warden Wilkins was a man who controlled the lives of others, while Ned Beatty often felt his own life was controlled by the demands of the industry. Wilkins held on to power until the end. Beatty held on to his craft. However, the journey of this cinematic titan eventually came to a peaceful end. On June 13, 2021, Ned Beatty passed away at his home in Los Angeles at the age of 83 from natural causes. He left behind 8 children and an estimated net worth of $5 million, a modest sum for a legend, but a testament to a man who worked for the love of the art, not just the paycheck. His legacy is one of unwavering dedication. RLEEERMEY as SHERIFFPIKE in life. R. Lee Ermey played the aging Sheriff Pike, a tough and uncompromising lawman who makes life miserable for Ray and Claude. At the age of 55, Ermey brought a terrifying realism to the role. He wasn't acting so much as channeling a lifetime of military discipline and authority. The role was a perfect fit, as his real life had been shaped by battles far more difficult than those depicted on screen. Ermey was a real-life Marine drill instructor and a Vietnam veteran. His first marriage fell apart shortly after returning from Vietnam, as post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, began to poison every conversation and attempt at a normal life. The horrors of war followed him home. Alcohol became his armor for a time, and arguments escalated until the marriage crumbled under the weight of the trauma. When he married Neela Ermey in 1975, the love was real, but the scars remained. She endured decades of his mood swings and the unpredictable temperament that haunted him long after his discharge. When acting replaced the battlefield, playing a specific role became a kind of prison. His enormous success in Full Metal Jacket catapulted him to fame, but it also confined him to the image of a stern military commander or law enforcement officer in almost all his later projects, such as Mississippi Burning C7N and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He was trapped in the persona of the yelling authority figure. The constant pressure of the job, combined with years of smoking, exacerbated lung damage already worsened by his service by the early 21st century. Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, and recurrent pneumonia made it difficult for him to breathe between takes. He was forced to adjust his work pace and use oxygen during long scenes, a warrior fighting a battle for breath. The connection between Sheriff Pike and R. Lee Ermey is stark. Pike was a man who imposed rules and order on others. Ermey was a man who lived by a strict code but was internally fighting the chaos of PTSD and physical decline. The toughness he projected on screen was the armor he wore to survive his reality. The drill sergeant finally stood down. R. Lee Ermey died on April 15, 2018, at the age of 74 from complications related to pneumonia, passing away peacefully in a Santa Monica hospital. His estimated net worth was $12 million, a testament to a man who survived the war, conquered Hollywood, and fought his own demons until the very end. Oba Babatunde as Willie Long. In life, Oba Babatunde played Willie Long, a gentle prisoner whose calm demeanor and enduring smile belied years of hidden pain and injustice. At age 47, he embodied the role of the observer, the historian of the group who kept the peace. The role stemmed from a truth Babatunde deeply understood, that the quiet people often bear the heaviest burdens of history. His performance was understated yet powerful, providing the emotional glue for the group of inmates. This character made a deep impression on him as the greatest difficulties of his own life unfolded behind closed doors. Born in Queens, New York, Babatunde was a man of the stage and screen, a true triple threat. However, his personal life was a juggling act. His marriage to Jane Wheeler began in 1981 with optimism, but the demands of his years on Broadway quickly tested them. The tour of the musical Dreamgirls, where he originated, a Tony-nominated role, kept him away from home for months. This led to arguments about separation and finances that neither expected so soon. When he moved to Hollywood, the racial barriers in the industry became even more severe. Despite his immense talent, he often lost leading roles to bigger names or faced the limited scope of roles available to black actors in the 90s. He played poorly paid supporting roles, and there were times when acting was not enough to support his family. By the mid-1990s, the pressures had increased to the point that his marriage almost collapsed. But Babatunde's return to steady acting and voiceover work saved them. He was a fighter, refusing to let the industry dictate his worth. As his career progressed, his health began to take a hit. The constant traveling between shoots, rehearsals, and filming took its toll. He poured his soul into projects like Philadelphia and later Dear White People, often working himself to the bone. This exhaustion became a constant struggle, forcing him to adopt a rigorous regimen of yoga and discipline to avoid complete burnout. Became a master of balance, prioritizing his well-being to survive the marathon of his career. The connection between Willie Long and Oba Babatunde is clear. Willie was a man who survived prison by maintaining his dignity and inner peace. Babatunde survived the prison of Hollywood typecasting and industry struggles by maintaining his discipline and artistic integrity. Both were men of quiet strength who refused to be broken. Today, at 73, Oba Babatunde continues to perform on television and stage, choosing projects that keep his life balanced rather than pushing him to the brink. His net worth is estimated at $15 million, reflecting a career built not on lucky breaks, but on decades of discipline, perseverance, and unwavering determination in an industry that once tried to eliminate him. Clarence Williams III. As Winston Hancock. In life, Clarence Williams III played Winston Hancock, the quiet, watchful elder prisoner who had been locked up for decades. At the age of 60, he brought a haunting dignity to the role. Winston was the man who had seen it all, whose presence commanded respect without raising a voice. This quiet menace and wisdom reflected his own character, a man who had overcome fame, addiction, and depression to rediscover himself. Williams was a television icon, famous for his role as Link Hayes in the Mod Squad in the late 60s. His marriage to actress Gloria Foster, the Oracle, from The Matrix began in 1967, a union of two powerhouses of black theater. But in the 1970s, the dark side of fame took hold. Heroin addiction plagued him. Foster watched the actor nearly die of an overdose, miss rehearsals, and humiliate himself professionally. The addiction poisoned everything, and roles disappeared. The marriage ultimately fell apart in 1984, though they remained close friends until her death. He spent decades rebuilding his career and his life. He returned with a vengeance in Purple Rain, Deep Cover, and Tales from the Hood, often playing troubled fathers, drug addicts, or broken men, roles that the industry cast him in because they refused to forget his troubled past. Yet, he imbued these characters with a Shakespearean depth. He worked tirelessly to prove he was reliable. But he rarely had a moment's respite. When illness finally struck, it was colon cancer. It took advantage of a body that had lived a hard life, but had fought its way back to sobriety and respectability. He kept his diagnosis largely private, continuing to work as long as he could. The connection between Winston Hancock and Clarence Williams III is moving. Winston was a lifer who had made peace with his fate, but never lost his dignity. Williams was a Hollywood lifer who had survived the death of his career to rise again, maintaining his dignity through every hardship. The journey ended on June 4, 2021. Clarence Williams III died at the age of 81 in Los Angeles. His estimated net worth of $2 million reflects a life full of great artistic moments, albeit overshadowed by struggles he never stopped fighting. He left a legacy of cool intensity that few actors could match. Heavy D as Jake, in life. Heavy D. Dwight Myers played Jake, a cheerful, gentle giant of a prisoner. At the age of 32, his character, with his charming smile, brought a lightness to the dark prison setting. Jake hid the pressures he experienced, much like Heavy D himself, behind the overweight. Lover persona was a man carrying burdens that began to make themselves felt, long before anyone realized the gravity of the situation. Heavy D was a hip-hop pioneer, the first rapper to head a major label, Uptown Records. His short-lived marriage and relationships were tested by his struggles with his weight, the expectations of the music industry, and the mental strain of constant touring. Even after he achieved success with albums like Living Large, the personal burden remained heavy. He dealt with the pain of losing his bandmate Trouble, T. Roy, in 1990, a wound he carried through all his subsequent relationships and work. During the 2000s, he sought to pivot his career. He attempted a serious comeback through acting, appearing in the critically acclaimed The Cider House, Rules, and On Stage. But his weight, once part of his appeal, became a severe health hazard. Behind his infectious laugh and soft voice was a man struggling with a heart condition and deep vein thrombosis. He experienced chronic leg swelling and circulation problems that he kept hidden from his fans, not wanting to dim his positive image. The connection between Jake and Heavy D is heartbreaking. Jake was a sweet soul in a hard place. Heavy D was a notoriously kind and gentle man in the ruthless music industry. Both were large men with even larger hearts whose physical presence belied a vulnerability. Suddenly, the music stopped. Heavy D died on November 8, 2011 at the age of 44 in Los Angeles. He collapsed outside his Beverly Hills home when a blood clot in his leg traveled to his lung pulmonary embolism. He was buried in New York, leaving behind an estimated fortune of $5 million and a legacy that ended far too soon. He was an artist who brought joy to the world but carried too much physical burden on himself. Rick James as Spanky, in life. Rick James appeared as Spanky, an eloquent and talented prison musician. At the age of 51, the casting was a nod to his real-life status as a music legend. However, this role concealed a far darker chaos than anything it portrayed on screen. By 1999, the decline of the super freak legend was already consuming him. Rick James was the king of punk funk, a musical genius. But his life was a cautionary tale of excess. His marriage to Tanya Hijazi and relationships before her crumbled under the weight of a massive crack cocaine addiction that completely took over his existence. Violence, paranoia, and sleepless nights spent binging destroyed his relationships long before the public knew the extent of the damage. His conviction for assaulting 2 women in the early 90s spelled the collapse of his career, leading to a stint in Folsom Prison. When he appeared in Life, he was attempting a comeback, but the damage to his body was already done. Years of drug abuse had permanently weakened his heart and led to a massive stroke during a concert in Denver in 1998, just a year before the film's release. He never fully recovered. Diabetes, pacemaker, and chronic exhaustion shaped his final years. He was a star surrounded by scandal and pity, trying to restore his name through writing and infrequent appearances, but his body was failing. The connection between Spanky and Rick James is tragic. Spanky was a musician trapped in prison. Rick James was a musical genius trapped in the prison of his own addiction and failing health. The music was the only thing that set both of them free. The funk legend's heart beat its last rhythm on August 6, 2004. Rick James died in Los Angeles at the age of 56 from respiratory and heart failure, with a cocktail of drugs in his system. He left behind a vast musical estate, but a personal legacy marred by tragedy. His path from the top of the charts to a premature death remains one of the most painful stories in music history. Bernie Mac as Jangle Leg, in Life. Bernie Mac played Jangle Leg, a restless, sharp-tongued prisoner with an erratic sense of humor and a memorable, distinctive walk. At 42, Mac stole every scene he was in. His character was loud, brash, and seemingly carefree, using jokes to conceal a much darker reality. It was a performance by a man who had been struggling with inner conflict and hardship long before Hollywood recognized his name. Bernie Mac's journey was one of the hardest climbs in show business. Born in Chicago, he faced poverty and tragedy. Early on, his marriage to Rhonda Gore, whom he married in 1977, was the rock of his life, weathering storms few couples can withstand. As they progressed from small Chicago clubs to performing stand-up, Mac's early struggles took a heavy toll. He worked tirelessly, often for little pay, fearing that success would never come. When it finally did with the original kings of comedy, his workload skyrocketed. However, as his career reached stratospheric heights with The Bernie Mac Show and films like Ocean's 11, his body began to fail him. In 2004, he was officially diagnosed with sarcoidosis, an inflammatory disease that attacked his lungs. He kept the severity of his condition largely private. Not wanting to worry his fans, he managed to finish filming Ocean's 13, Guess Who, and the final seasons of his show, all while battling a persistent cough joint pain and chronic insomnia. The disease weakened his immune system, leaving him vulnerable to pneumonia. In the last year of his life, the situation became dire. 3 hospitalizations in a matter of months forced him to cancel tour dates. Rhonda became his constant caregiver, watching the man who made the world laugh struggle to breathe. He was a man who gave everything to his audience, often at the expense of his own health, driven by a desire to provide for his family and leave a legacy. The connection between Jangle Leg and Bernie Mac is poignant. Jangle Leg was a character who physically couldn't stand still, always moving, always talking. Bernie Mac was a man who refused to stop working, driven by an internal motor that eventually outpaced his physical body. Jangle Leg masked his pain with humor. Bernie Mac masked his illness with performance. Tragically, the laughter had to end. On August 9, 2008, Bernie Mac passed away at the age of 50 from complications of pneumonia in a Chicago hospital. He left behind his wife Rhonda, his daughter Janice, and a legacy that redefined comedy. His net worth of $15 million reflects a brilliant career that ended far too soon, proving that even his loudest laughter couldn't erase the physical pain he carried inside. Barry Shabaka Henley as Poker Face. In life, Barry Shabaka Henley played Poker Face, a character whose name perfectly described his demeanor. At the age of 42, Henley portrayed a stoic, unreadable prisoner who was a master of the card table. This role reflected the quiet resilience he displayed in real life, where difficulties often came unexpectedly and were met with a calm exterior. Henley's career is one of the most respected in Hollywood, often serving as a muse for director Michael Mann. But behind the steady work was a life of quiet struggle. His marriage to Vanessa Shaw in the 1990s showed promise, but crumbled under the pressure of an ever-changing career when his experimental television debut. The Clippers flopped. It left him in debt, and financial problems took a toll on his family life. He was a working actor, meaning he lived from check to check for many years. His career revived with films like The Terminal Collateral and Miami Vice. However, the lifestyle of a character actor involves long journeys and extended shooting schedules. This replaced financial worries with emotional distance, and his marriage quietly but painfully fell apart in the 2000s. The breakup coincided with a period of intense psychological stress. The uncertainty surrounding his career made him feel abandoned at times, leading to bouts of depression and burnout due to the constant grind of auditions. He gradually rebuilt his life through stage work and teaching, using the discipline he learned playing jazz to weather the turbulent years until his mental state stabilized. He found solace in the craft itself, becoming a reliable force in the industry. The connection between Poker Face and Barry Shabaka Henley is undeniable. Poker Face never revealed his hand, keeping his emotions in check to survive. The game Henley too kept his personal struggles private, maintaining a professional composure that allowed him to survive the volatile industry of Hollywood. Now 69. Henley remains active in television, recently gaining wider recognition for his role in the hit sitcom Bob Hart's Abishola. His estimated net worth of $3 million reflects a life built not on luck, but on resilience. Fitting chapter for a man who spent decades honing the art of maintaining his composure.